Hi there, I'm Owen Fitz and welcome to the F1tzStop Podcast. On the last podcast it was Max Verstappen, but this time it's smooth operator Carlos Sainz getting his win for Ferrari. It's Ferrari's first win of the season. It's the first win this season in 2024 for a car that's not Red Bull, and it's the first time that a non-Red Bull car has won a race, and Carlos Sainz was the last driver to win a race at the Singapore Grand Prix when Max Verstappen had a really bad weekend but still managed to finish in a point. So we finally had a race where Max Verstappen hasn't won, but he hasn't scored a point. He hasn't finished at all. The last time Max Verstappen retired from a race was back in 2002 when the new regulations started. Ferrari went top at the start of the season and Max retired with a mechanical issue in Australia, and he hasn't had a mechanical issue that has had him lose a race and drop out and get a DNF in 2 years. That car has been absolute bulletproof, and we know from the comments over the weekend, even when Perez did manage to get on the podium, that car is an absolute rocket ship. So we saw Max Verstappen's first retirement, and of course Max Verstappen was going for another 10 races in a row, and just when we were thinking Formula 1 was getting a bit boring, Max Verstappen retires, and I think everyone screamed with excitement. But I think it wasn't just for screw you Max Verstappen. I think it was just Formula 1 needed this. We needed a different winner. We needed something new. Look, it's only early doors, but it has pretty much opened the championship, hasn't it? For Ferrari and for like Carlos Sainz and for Charles Leclerc. Of course, Carlos Sainz missing the last race in Jeddah due to getting his appendix out. So he's gone from having no drive with Ferrari, because Lewis Hamilton's coming in 2025. He doesn't have a contract for anyone else. He ends up getting his appendix taken out. Behrman comes in and takes his place for the last Grand Prix. Gets a bit of infection. He's not doing great. He comes back to Australia. He doesn't look good. He doesn't sound good out of the car. But in the car, he was performing brilliantly. Put the car on the front row of the grid, second to Max Verstappen in qualifying. And we were thinking maybe, just maybe, Ferrari might be able to fight, but Max Verstappen got the lead at the start of the race, and then after a few laps, we see lap 2, we see an overtake from Carlos Sainz, and it looked like one of the best overtakes of all time, till you realise Max Verstappen made a small bit of a mistake and ended up giving that place to Carlos Sainz with the DRS. And then slowly but surely Max kind of felt that the car was driving like it had a handbrake on it, and Max Verstappen was out of the Australian Grand Prix, something we're not used to. And in fairness to Carlos Sainz, well done to him. He held it for the rest of the race, and I think Ferrari as well just decided, look, we've got a 1-2 here. Whichever driver is in front is going to finish in front. And you could say, why didn't they favour Charles? Like, if this was Michael Schumacher back in the day, they would have done it to Felipe Massa. And also if Alonso was still there. But Ferrari were like, no, we've got a 1-2 today. We're going to hold on to this. And they just managed the pace. And the McLarens were keeping them going, but I don't think had the pace to outpace Ferrari this weekend. And that win for Lando Norris still seems like a dream away. But hey, it's Ferrari's first 1-2 in a long time, and they'll be absolutely delighted. And in Maranello as well, they've got the flags out. It's a tradition in Ferrari to celebrate the 1-2, and I think for Fred and the team, they just really needed this. Can Ferrari give a challenge to Red Bull, or are they just going to be there on weekends like this? Look, we'll find out in the next few weeks. But Carlos Sainz, to go from getting his appendix out to being a smooth operator and taking a win, he's unemployed. He doesn't have a drive. So people are going to be sniffing around. Why wouldn't they for Carlos Sainz? But that will surely get him a drive for 2025. And then having a look at the results, his teammate Charles Leclerc in second. He'll be disappointed not to get the win or not to be able to fight this weekend. But look, it's another podium for Charles, and it's more points on board as he fights with Max Verstappen so far in the Drivers' Championship. Lando Norris finished third. Another great weekend for McLaren. Look, McLaren in a way better position than what they were last year, but they're still off the pace. But look, they're the third best team in Formula 1. They're going to pick up these podiums, and you never know with races where Red Bull mightn't finish or Ferrari might come into some problems. So we might just see Oscar Piastri on the top step again. Remember, he did win himself a sprint race, and Lando Norris still missing out on that coveted win. But look, it probably still will come. His teammate and the home driver in fourth place with Piastri. He'll be absolutely delighted with fourth place at his home Grand Prix. Great performance from him the weekend. Sergio Perez in fifth. Just looked like he didn't have the pace all race, but Christian Horner said afterwards that he picked up a bit of debris and he had some damage to his car, and that pretty much just kind of led to him just getting 5th place. He couldn't really fight the McLarens or the Ferraris in front, and we know in Formula 1 when you lose any bit of downforce due to some damage, your car is absolutely useless. But still, look, points on the board for Perez, but Perez really needs to be there on the weekends that Max Verstappen has a bad weekend. So he didn't have a great qualifying. Fought early with the Mercedes of George Russell, but not much he could do with damage. Perez needs to be up front. Now, in fairness, he did for the first 2 Grand Prix, but the one weekend where Max had a problem, Sergio Perez wasn't there to pick up those points, so he'll be bitterly disappointed with that weekend. Great performance at Fernando Alonso in 6th place, even though Fernando Alonso gets himself a 20-second penalty, which we will get into. Lance Stroll, he'll be happy with 7th. Good pace from Lance Stroll. I felt all this weekend, bit of a scary moment with George Russell hanging on the side of the track, but good weekend I think for Lance Stroll, beaten obviously by Fernando Alonso, much faster than him, but Stroll will be happy with 7th, especially after the race in Jeddah. Yuki Tsunoda, what a great drive from Yuki. He's really shown that he's the team leader. We'll get into the whole Daniel Ricciardo thing. He is in 8th, Hülkenberg in 9th, and Magnussen in 10th. That's a double finish in the points for Haas, and 2 races in a row as well that Haas have finished in the points. They'll be absolutely thrilled with that, and it looks like Haas have kind of sorted out their problems. You know, it's a hard fought, you know, point for 9th and 10th, but they're doing absolutely fantastic. 11th place, we've got Albon. We'll get on to that. Didn't work out great for Williams the weekend. Daniel Ricciardo, bad qualifying, not a great race. No points for him. 12th place in his home race. Gasly in 13th place for Alpine. Showed a bit of pace throughout the weekend compared to what they had the last 2 races, but still very much off the pace in 13th. Valtteri Bottas in 14th. His teammate Eoghain Yu in 15th. Esteban Ocon in 16th. And it's a double DNF for George Russell, and Lewis Hamilton in 18th, and Max Verstappen in 19th. And of course, Logan Sargent didn't get to qualify, and he didn't get to race. So let's look at the Williams scenario first. This was a tough one for Williams. So Williams come into Formula 1 this year, and they're not really ready. They don't really have the spare parts. They don't have the chassis. They're probably lucky to make the first 2 Grand Prix. Alex Albon bins it in practice, destroys his chassis. It can't be fixed. They don't have a 3rd spare chassis. What do? They tell Logan Sargent, sorry, you're not racing. Your teammate is more likely to get points. He's taking your car. You're sitting out this weekend. For James Vowles to make that decision. Now, everyone kind of thought it. I think Martin Brundle and Kroon Chandok were saying on Sky, look, they probably thought this was going to happen. But the fact that Williams went off and did that and favoured Albon at a time where Logan Sargent is struggling. Now, like, he's actually not that far off speed pace of Albon, but just when it comes to qualifying, comes to the race, just doesn't seem to come together for him. You know, he's struggling. He probably isn't motivated. He's lucky to get a seat this year. He's probably worried, going, I need to perform if I want to be in Formula 1 next year. He must have took that badly. Like, he'll probably play the team card and go, yeah, great. But I'm sure deep down inside he's going, no, I want to get out of here. Get me out of this track. Send me somewhere else. I can't wait for the next race. And it'll be interesting to see what's going to happen in Japan. Are they going to have 2 cars ready for Japan? It's going to be a very interesting one. But Albon didn't get a point, and it didn't really work out for Williams this weekend. And in my theory, you go, well, sorry, Albon, you binned it. You should take the rest of the weekend out. It's like if you crashed in qualifying or the race, you know, you're not in. Your teammate then should have the chance to score. So Logan didn't even get a chance to show what he can do this weekend. He's bitterly disappointed. That's a big decision for James Vowles, and with the sponsors as well. So you can imagine some of your American sponsors and people who paid money for Logan Sargent to be in Formula 1 to turn around to them and go, sorry, we're not going to race this weekend. So I don't think Albon was too delighted about it. It was also Albon's birthday as well. Awkward. His birthday present was a Williams Formula 1 car. I don't think Albon is the kind of driver that would have been too excited to take Logan's seat. You could see by his body language. But to be honest, he didn't get much of a choice, really, did he? So, 10th times for Williams, and of course not scoring points as well, and Haas scoring points at the last 2 Grand Prix. Under pressure for James Vowles and Williams. Let's hope, fingers crossed, they can turn it around pretty soon. Mercedes, what an awful weekend. They were just off the pace, really bad qualifying. Lewis Hamilton didn't even make it into the top 10 for qualifying to Q3. George Russell off the pace as well, and at the start of the race they were saying, even with Lewis Hamilton on the soft tyres, they just couldn't keep the pace. And he said that Sergio Perez in front of him was an absolute rocket ship like last year, which it was. And then poof, very quickly Lewis Hamilton, his engine, it just blows, gone. It was just click instant click of the fingers and that engine was gone. Very disappointing for Lewis Hamilton, who looks really unmotivated. Nothing about this year's car has changed from last year's car. They're still off the pace. If anything, probably more off the pace and maybe a second the pace off the Red Bulls of Max Verstappen and Sergio Perez. So very disappointed from Lewis Hamilton. I say he just wants to go to Ferrari, because they're going to stop using him. They're going to stop giving him data. They're going to stop using him in meetings soon. Next year's car, 2026. So all the kind of stuff Lewis Hamilton won't hear is not going to help. And for a 7-time world champion, and we know what Lewis Hamilton can do when you give him a car. So he's really demotivated, and he'll be looking to score points at the next Grand Prix. He absolutely loves Japan, so let's see how that car is suited in Japan. George Russell, here's a fact. Every time Carlos Sainz wins a Grand Prix, George Russell crashes out of the Grand Prix. That is a fact. That is a fact. Every time Carlos Sainz wins a Grand Prix, and that is what, 3 of them? So Silverstone, and last year in Singapore, and this year in Australia, and Alonso gets a 20-second penalty. It is clear Alonso braked very early for that corner, but he will defend and he will say, well, I had an issue. And if you listen to the team radio, they made it sound like he had an issue. And the FIA have decided that it was dangerous driving on his part, and he was pretty much blocking George Russell. In my opinion, I think George Russell just did a George on it. Under pressure, with a sly old fox like Fernando Alonso in front of you got to be very wary, and I think he just got caught out. Yes, Alonso did brake too early. I don't think he brake tested him, but he probably did brake a lot earlier than he should have. Caused George Russell to hit the barrier, go over the stones, and then back onto the track. It was very scary. He was calling for the red flag. He was roaring down the radio, red flag, red flag, red flag. I'm in the middle of the track. I don't blame him, because the likes of Hubert in Belgium, sadly we lost him, didn't we, in F2, and Impact at full speed. So Lance Stroll was coming very fast. Lance Stroll had enough time to slow down. Luckily enough, his team had told him to slow down, because you're not going to stop a Formula 1 car when you're doing 150, 160 miles an hour around the corner, and you see George Russell kind of sideways on the track. So I don't blame George for being scared. I don't blame him for calling for the red flag. And look, thank God that Lance Stroll, and the last thing Lance Stroll needed was to go absolutely flying into a sideways George Russell in the middle of the track. Interesting enough, they didn't take out the red flag, and it took him so long to do it as well. Now, it's easy to say as an armchair Formula 1 podcaster and fan to look at the telly and go, why isn't that red flag? They need to look at where the cars are. They need to see what happens if they throw out a VSC and a red flag as well to slow the cars down. You don't want to be doing it while cars are battling each other into corners going down the straight. So, it's not a thing of we just go instant red flag, but I felt it just was a small bit slow. If it was 2 laps, we actually probably would have had a restart, and we would have had Charles, and we would have had Carlos, and we would have had Lando Norris maybe fighting it out for a lap or 2. We were robbed of that. I know what happened last year. We were nearly robbed of that. It could have happened. We could have had maybe a 2 or 3 lap shootout, but they decided just with the last lap coming that it was easier to bring out the VSC and all the cars would slowly go by. But my whole thing is, twice they slowly went past George Russell. You're just kind of thinking, if something had happened, look, but the race directors know what they're doing. I think it should have been a red flag, and they could have just finished the race. But then again, we don't want to get into the whole debacle of finishing races and red flags and safety cars on the last lap of a Grand Prix. We really don't need that again. So disappointing weekend, George Russell under pressure and crashing again. We had that incident last year in Singapore, and it's not the first time that George has done it. He'll be absolutely sickened with himself, and Toto Wolff says he wants to punch himself in the nose, and I can kind of see why. Very disappointing weekend for Mercedes to go away from this Grand Prix with no points, and it's very rare that Mercedes leave a Grand Prix with no points. Mercedes really under pressure. They're going to be stuck with this car for 2025. They'll be really looking forward to getting a new Mercedes engine and a new design for 2026. It's back to basics for everyone in 2026. It's scrapping everything and building a new car. Anybody could win in 2026, so Mercedes will be looking forward to that one. So it was a weekend where Red Bull had a DNF, Sergio Perez off the pace. It was Carlos Sainz taking the win ahead of his teammate, and a great weekend for McLaren as well. Messy weekend for Williams, and a really bad Grand Prix for Mercedes. We go to Suzuka next, which definitely will suit the Red Bull, will suit the Ferrari as well, and I think Lando Norris did well last year, didn't he, in Suzuka? I think the car McLaren will go well there. Alpine are in an absolutely awful place at the moment. No change there. Showed a bit more pace this weekend, but still not able to fight for those points. Before I go, I want to talk about Daniel Ricciardo. Daniel Ricciardo is under pressure, and it seems that Liam Lawson could be there to take his seat. Now, it's not been officially said, but a few media outlets have spoken that Daniel Ricciardo has about 2 or 3 races left, and if he doesn't perform, he is out of Formula 1. Look, Daniel Ricciardo is the guy we love, the smiley guy. He's a lot of fun, but he's not delivering, and he hasn't delivered since he came back from his injury last year, and he hasn't delivered this year, and he had a shocking weekend. He got a lap time deleted in qualifying this weekend gone, which kind of just led to a really poor Grand Prix. He's been off the pace compared to his teammate Yuki Tsunoda. Daniel Ricciardo, he needs to get that motivation back. He needs to get that skill back into the car. He needs to be comfortable with the car. He needs to get points, or he needs to be close to the points, or we won't see Daniel Ricciardo in Formula 1. Everybody was talking Daniel up to replace Sergio Perez possibly next year. Maybe they'll be looking at Carlos Sainz and going, he won the Grand Prix the weekend when Max didn't finish. Daniel Ricciardo under serious pressure, and we hate to see it, but just maybe the spark is gone out of Daniel Ricciardo. I think leaving Red Bull was the worst thing that Daniel Ricciardo ever did. So keep watching that story. I think in the next few weeks we'll be hearing that Helmut Marko and the crew will be kind of saying if Daniel Ricciardo doesn't pick up the pace, he's gone from the Grand Prix. Now, he will be suited and will like the circuit in Suzuka in Japan. So weird to be going to Japan at this time of year in April. Normally we go to Japan around October. I wonder what the weather is going to be like in Japan. Do they still get rain? But I think the Grand Prix is probably more suited to this time of year in Japan. So we go to the next Grand Prix. Can Ferrari keep the fight with Red Bull and Max Verstappen, or is Max Verstappen going to be back to his 100% record again this week or the next weekend when we head to Suzuka? Is there question marks over the reliability of that Red Bull car that has been absolutely bulletproof? We will find out when we head to one of my favourite circuits, which is Suzuka. I love the absolute old classic circuits, and as well the fans are crazy with their DRS hats and their Formula 1 car hats, and they just really love their Formula 1 over in Japan. They are massive fans. Lewis Hamilton has a massive following over in Japan. That is the next Grand Prix. Carlos Sainz wins in Australia. Smooth operator minus his appendix. Formula 1 moves to Japan next. Thank you so much for listening to the F1tzStop Podcast. If you want to ever talk Formula 1, slide into the DMs. If you ever want to join me on Zoom to have a chat about the season and how the season's going and how you see the season ending for 2024, drop me a message. Thank you for watching and listening to the F1tzStop Podcast.